It's August 4th, 2026. My name is Nancy Groce. I'm a folklorist here at the American Folklife Center. I'm with my colleague, Andrea, who is also on staff here at the American Folklife Center. And we have the pleasure of interviewing Rathje, who has just given a great Botkin Lecture on education and folklore. But we wanted to learn a little bit more about her. So we're going to just chat for a few minutes about how she got into folklore and education and her other interests. So first of all, welcome. Thank you again for coming to the Library of Congress. That was a terrific talk.
It was an honor, thank you.
And I should also start by saying that you're the Executive Director of Local Learning. Yes. And do you want to just sum up quickly what local learning is about?
Absolutely. Local Learning is the National Network for Folk Arts and Education, and we are a national arts service organization that we publish the Journal of Folklore and Education and other lesson plans. We offer professional development for teachers, and at the heart of what we do is to make sure that culture shows up in the classroom as an asset, that students can see themselves, their stories, their elders as having worth in the ways that we teach and learn.
What a wonderful thing to do. But how did you get into that? Do you want to talk a little bit? Where are you from originally?
Well, I grew up in Ankeny, Iowa, so very Midwestern, and did my undergraduate work at Wartburg College in Iowa, and then then I took a year off and was a VISTA volunteer in Missouri, Columbia, Missouri, and then that is where I started my graduate work in folklore. But I could tell you about how I came to even study folklore, if you would like.
Oh, yes, please.
So I was a VISTA volunteer, and it was a literacy project in Columbia, Missouri. And I didn't know what I wanted to do next. My undergraduate degrees were in English and folklore. But I also knew I wanted to be a part of making a difference. Like, I wanted to do something and not just be stuck in an ivory tower. Like, this is Lisa, 18-year-old, 19-year-old thinking. And so how can I make a difference? How can I not get stuck? So as a VISTA volunteer, I was encouraged to go talk to the English department. They were like, you were an English major. You should at least talk to them about graduate school. Like, what do they have? So it was like the anti-entrance interview. And the director of graduate studies at the time was Anand Prahlad. And so I go to Prahlad's office, and I'm like, I really don't think I want to go to grad school. This is not where I belong. I want to be in the world. I want to make a difference, maybe be an activist. I don't know. And Prahlad just leans back in his office chair, and he looks at me and he's like, we might have something for you. So he dealt with my naivety and enthusiasm, and we talked for over an hour. By the end of that discussion, he had convinced me to apply to the graduate program. And when I was accepted, he called me and he was like, okay, now we really need to talk. So I show up and he says, you took a year off, so I think you should take a class this summer. I was like, okay, because I had written then, I still didn't even know what the word folklore was. Like, that was not a word in my lexicon, right? And so I'd written to get into graduate school saying I wanted to study the literature of the revolution. Like, what does that mean? I don't know. It's amazing that they were like, yeah, we'll take a chance on this person. So he calls me in, he's like, so I think you should take a class with me this summer. And it was on the Proverbs of the Rastafari. And I was like, oh, okay, this is not even something I could have imagined. And that's like the first point, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know. And in the end, what graduate school helped me kind of realize, there was so much that you don't know, and that you can't do big things, think big things without always knowing the right questions that have to go along with it. So I took his class on the Proverbs of the Rastafari, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, Proverbs, sayings, folklore. And then he said I had to study with Elaine Lawless And she was teaching a class that fall called Politics, Social Justice, and Folklore.
And she's a very well-known folklorist.
Elaine
also,
Lawless is a
yes.
very well-known folklorist. And by the end of that fall semester, I had officially changed all of my paperwork to become an English candidate, but with folklore as my main area.
So coming to this as someone who is wanting to make a difference and wanting to be activated, what was it about that class and that methodology, looking back as someone who was so invested in doing this today for young people, what was it about that class that really activated you?
A couple of things. One, I thought I had to go over there to make a difference. Like, I had to go someplace. And folklore and the study of folklore reminds us there's so much here. So first of all, paying attention to your own community and your own community's both stories and opportunities, but also challenges and tensions. That was the first thing. And then the second thing was to realize the ways that we create group is also the ways that we create outsiders. And that the ways we tell stories both protects us, but also creates tension and alienates others. And so like once you start to like play with these societal pieces of our larger cultural puzzles, to me, it started to click. Oh, I think that by engaging in this world of folk life, which was a new concept for me, I was able to start to get at some foundational ways that community works, acts, lives, loves, and supports each other. And that was so important. And the last thing I'll say, and this informs all of the education work that I do now, what those two courses that like kind of set me off on this journey did, it's all asset-based in the sense of so much of where like my previous thinking had been was deficit-based. Like, oh, this group needs help because I'm gonna go in and help so-and-so. And folk life instead is like, the stories, the music, the clothing, these are all the assets of community. These, you know, so like you start from there, which that's like a really, really important perspective shift.
And then how did you did a doctorate in folklore. What did you write on for your doctorate?
So my dissertation, it was looking at representation and social justice in festival and education. So, and actually, so my, I was all but dissertation. Oh, actually, this story involves the Library of Congress.
Please.
So I was a graduate student. I had taken my comprehensive exams in the spring of 2005. And I also was an elected member of our graduate and professional student council at the University of Missouri. And I'd been elected the national issues coordinator. You might, what is national issues? And what does that have to do with being a graduate and professional student? What we did, we actually would come to Washington, D.C. To lobby for issues that were core to graduate students, you know, funding, a variety of things. So I was in D.C. that fall, and I talked to Elaine Lawless before I came to D.C. I'm like, you know, I just finished my comps. I don't know what the next thing is. I wasn't looking for an academic job. And I was like, who should I talk to? She's like, why don't you talk to my friend Peggy Bolger at the Library of Congress?
Who was then the director of the American
Folklife Center. So I did, and I set up an appointment, and I came in super nervous. And I was like, what am I gonna say to Peggy Bolger, director of the American Folklife Center? My big question, who do you think is doing the most important social justice work in folklore today? She didn't hesitate. She said the Institute for Cultural Partnerships in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I was like, I've never heard of the Institute for Cultural Partnerships. It sounds super interesting. So I came home from that trip, looked a little bit at what ICP was doing, and I was like, oh, that's super interesting. And then I kid you not even a week later, I see a notice on Publor, the listserv that a lot of folklorists, especially in 2005, were on. And it was Carlos Fernandez saying, just so everybody knows, I'm leaving my position at the Institute for Cultural Partnerships. And I was like, what? I literally just a week ago heard about this, and it feels like exactly what I want to do. So I sent an email to Amy Skillman, and I said,
Who is the director?
who was the director of Folklife at the Institute for Cultural Partnerships. And I said, so I hear that one of your staff members is leaving. And if you're going to be opening a position, I would love to talk to you about it. And so I interviewed for that job at the American Folklore Society meeting in Atlanta that year, and started in January 2006. Now, I'm still answering your question about the dissertation. It all fits because, so I was still all but dissertation, but now I have accepted this job, and it was a dream job. Like, this was what I wanted to do. It was using the methodologies and theories of folklore in a community context to make a difference. It was just, so I get into that position, and Lisa Higgins, a folklorist at the University of Missouri, had given me this really good advice. She said, work for 1 year before you try to go back and work on your dissertation. She's like, just give yourself 100% to the job. It's gonna take a lot from you. I was like, okay. So I worked for a year, and in that first year, we had a grant to work with education in the alternative high school in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And that was the hardest thing that I'd ever done. Showing up every day and designing a program that actually was not only like meant the kids were learning something, but that was meaningful for them. Like, there were so many different pieces about teaching that I had to think about. So at the end of that first year, I was like, oh, wow, that year went really fast. And now if I'm gonna finish this PhD, I need to write my dissertation. And that's where, before I'd been like really focused on like festivals and public programming and power and representation. And then I folded in education, and that became like a cornerstone of my dissertation, but still through this lens of thinking about power and representation, but now in a classroom setting, and who has power and who doesn't, and how do we actually, like you always are saying, like students should have agency to be good learners, but that's not usually the case, especially in high school, especially in an alternative high school like what we found ourselves working in Harrisburg. So my dissertation was me wrestling with like the ways, I had all these big ideas of theory and like how theory should work in our spaces. But then I had this like reality that was super hard, that was challenging because of culture, because of disinvestment.
You mean just day-to-day in the classroom?
Day-to-day in the classroom. So what does it actually mean to live the ideals that I had from folklore in a space like a classroom, and working that out through the writing of my dissertation, but then really, it was just about showing up every day and learning from the kids, and that's what I bring now to my work in folklore and education.
And how did you get to local learning?
So there's a whole long story there, but the easiest version is in 2008, I met Patty Bowman at a National Assembly of State Art Agencies gathering.
Who's the founder of local learning?
So local learning, and I love this about local learning. Local learning wasn't founded by an individual. It was founded by a committee. In 1993, the National Endowment for the Arts brought together a group of folklorists, community leaders, teaching artists, and said, hey, we've got this great program in folk and traditional arts. We have this great program in arts and education, but there isn't enough like conversation between these two. And there's so much probably happening, but we don't know what it is. So this task force of about 35 people got together And, or I shouldn't call it a task force at that point. It was a group of people, concerned citizens, came together at the National Endowment for the Arts in 1993. And they left that meeting saying, we need to establish a task force for folk arts and education. And they had Patty Bowman then at that time as the director of the task force. And so Patty served in that role from 1993, and then with City Lore incorporated local learning as an independent 501c3 nonprofit with this national mission to serve as a service organization for folk arts and education in 2005. So Patty was the founding director of local learning and been doing all this fabulous work with City Lore and others. And then I met her in 2008 when I was still working at the Institute for Cultural Partnerships and doing this arts education program that was absolutely amazing, transformative, and really, really hard. So I met Patty at this meeting where we were trying to infiltrate arts education at state arts agencies. I shouldn't use that word, but that's kind of what it was. And that also is really hard because arts education, like they have this really strict sequential learning, like this is what arts education is. And what we did as folklorists, that was like interviewing and ethnography. Like, where's the art? We're like, oh, there's art everywhere, art of everyday lives. And look at these amazing traditional artists we work with. Anyway, it's a hard, hard thing to be able to like do this. But Patty and I, through a series of events, ended up roommates. And Patty later said, she's like, I'm usually really picky about roommates. And here I am just stuck with this person that I'd never met.
Was this at a conference? Or?
So it was like their conference, their convening in Chattanooga. So we got to know each other and we really liked each other and we had great conversations. And I ended up doing a bunch of contracts for local learning, including in 2014, Patty and I, she had published for years CARTS, the newsletter with cultural resources for teachers. And we were like, we still need publications. And I love the idea of making it both open access and peer reviewed so that we could make sure that we had rigorous, high quality, but also super accessible materials. So we started the Journal of Folklore and Education in 2014 when I was just working as a contractor for local learning. So like, you know, diving in and out for a lot of different kinds of projects. And then in 2017, I became executive director of local learning, and Patty has stayed on as our constant kind of national thought leader, consultant, and friend. I mean, Patty and I talk every day. So
you've been with them about 10 years now.
I'm coming up on a 10-year anniversary.
It's really, you guys are doing just wonderful work. I'd love to go, we can probably talk for hours, and I want to keep this relatively short. But what haven't we asked you about, or what do you want to, what would you like people to know about you or what you're working on next?
Oh, that's really interesting. I feel like so much of these stories, they already, like, they keep circling around, like, what do I want people to know? I want everyone to, like, think about the ways that we teach and learn and to see how culture matters in all of it. And like, that's what I most want people to know. And you're like, well, but I asked you about you, but that's also like kind of who I am. Like, I think that if I was to say like, what are the ways all these different like stories of Lisa Rathje connect? It's that I love being curious. And being in these roles has allowed me to continue to be a learner and to be super curious. So like, I feel awkward sometimes, like here I was giving a lecture, and it's like, all I wanna do is like engage each of you in like a series of questions and conversations, and like, how can we like, what do you see? And you know, like, oh my gosh, you're giving me a whole new area that we could just like do a deep dive in and do some more work and research with. It's so much fun. But like, that's how I try to live my life. Like, how can I be curious? Be it through travel or like with my family. We play a lot of games. Like my husband and I, for our wedding, instead of like your traditional dance, we played long games. And because it's just to be like in interaction and like always learning and trying new things and maybe being a little competitive, but it's still a lot of fun.
The last question that I would want to ask is, what are your hopes for either local learning or for the field as a whole, for education and folklore and that intersection? What's your hope for that moving forward?
That's such a good question. And you know, what I want for local learning is actually in some ways what I want for the field. Like, I think that we need to continue to think about this all, and by this, education and learning, but also kind of a lot of our other social cultural constructs as systemic. And like, how are we an ecosystem? How is local learning and other folklorists and cultural institutions and community-based institutions all a part of a living, thriving ecosystem? And what does it mean to be a good partner and resource in that kind of an ecosystem? To me, it's very collaborative and kind of team-oriented, but that doesn't mean we're all doing the same thing. Like, how do each of us have different assets within this ecosystem, and how do we keep like eliciting and pulling out the pieces, not in an extractive way, but in an amplifying way that others can bring into these spaces? And for an organization like Local Learning, which is really small, but we do a lot of work at a national level, it's also like about how can we pay attention to where systems aren't working, and what kind of support, what kind of resources can we be a part of in those spaces? So I don't know, you're asking me an idea that's like not fully formed, so my response isn't very coherent or concise. It's not a story that I like used to telling yet, but isn't that also kind of a good thing? Like when we're struggling to start a new story, and so like I don't have like all of the plot line down. I can't just like say, oh yeah, local learning, this is what's gonna look like in 5 years or 10 years. Instead, it's gonna be super iterative. I mean, everything's in kind of a different space right now. I feel like a lot of things are destabilized. I would even go so far as to say some things are really broken right now. And sometimes we can react to that brokenness or that destabilization with despair or like, and just wanting to like crawl back into your shell where it's like more comfortable. And instead, I'm like kind of curious about it. Like, oh, this is super broken, but what can we build that isn't what used to be here? Now we can do something different because this looks like a different kind of story. And I think part of what local learning is trying to do is to be a good listener, to pay attention to our ecosystem, to know like kind of both what our assets are, but also like what we don't know and who else might know something that we don't know that should be involved in these conversations, because that's how we're gonna continue to make a difference when it comes to learning and education in our spaces. So I don't know, that was kind of a long, rambly response, but it's because I don't know. But I think we have to keep being curious. We have to keep being folklorists and ethnographers, even about our own professional spaces. Otherwise, you're just gonna keep doing what you've always done. And right now, we're in a space where we can't, especially in education, especially in how we're teaching, we can't just keep doing what we've always done. It's time to be curious.
I love that, and I think it has a lot of resonance with something that you said in your talk about the value of unmediated experiences for gaining meaning and for learning. And of course, you're talking about children in a learning environment, but it's true for us, certainly, as folklorists and educators as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming to the library and for giving such a great Botkin lecture.
Thank you, Nancy. This has been so much fun, and thank you.